So no Holly tonight. At least she might call in if she can. She's at a Christmas party, but let's get all the rest of this fired up and then we'll kick it off. Anyways, how's everyone doing tonight? Humming. I got to do some sharing and we've got to, we're just going to have pretty much just easygoing chat tonight. Talk about whatever you guys want to. I might have a few things to mention. But let me. Sorry, guys. Okay. Would be nice if I had another pair of hands. But yeah, we're just gonna have general free talk. Let's kick this intro off.
Live from Utah's Wasatch Front, the pulse of the Mountain West, where the issues that shape your life meet the truth that sets you free. Across Utah, across the Republic, and around the world, welcome. This is KMMU.
All right. Big thanks to KMMU. Humming, all that stuff. Let me make my chair sit up correctly. But so don't really have anything really. There's always a lot on my mind and probably usually a lot on everyone's mind. But I was kind of thinking we just wander wherever anyone else wanted to wander and kind of open up conversation. Hopefully everyone's had a good week. My week has been pretty busy. Another loss in the family. A lot of stress with all that. And so, yeah. I don't think we'll have a show next week, seeing how it's the day before Thanksgiving. I think we'll take that night off so that we can make sure we have everything done and we're ready to go for Thanksgiving. And I don't know, maybe that'd be a good subject tonight to cover what we're thankful for, who we're thankful for, anything like that. Yeah, just this morning, as I'm getting ready for work, I wake up at 3:30 in the morning and it's early and I pop some headphones in and turn on usually a podcast or something to kind of get me going, as I stumble and mumble my way through the morning. And I'm listening to a podcast called Dad Saves America. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard it. It's a pretty good one. I think the guy's name is John Papola, and he's talking on this one, probably a day old or a little bit old. He's talking to Brett Weinstein. Anyways, for those who don't know who Brett Weinstein is, he was like a super leftist that he went through it in the DEI at his college. He was biology professor at Evergreen State up there in, I want to say, like Eugene, Oregon area. And it's a interesting school, kind of a super hippie school. And I'm not going to, tread all over that. You can, I would suggest that you find out about that through other sources than me, because on that one I will especially carry a large bias. But anyway, so that Evergreen State thing hit, and then right after that we rolled into um the COVID lockdown and all that. It's like real close together. And him as a biologist, he started questioning the COVID stuff, and he got silenced and got in a lot of trouble and everything else. And so he's been it kind of made him, I wouldn't say it made him right wing or any of that, but it made him question the orthodoxy of the day, which the left is an orthodoxy that we have right now. It's kind of the national religion. And if you're not a part of it, then you are a national religious atheist. And the reason I say it's a national religion is you look at it and it's controlled through the colleges. It's controlled through most of the courts, through your inner cities, all of your cultural hubs, Hollywood, all the movie production, everything else. I mean, I don't know. Patton Oswalt's been going on a podcast tour, kind of not bad mouthing Joe Rogan, but he's going soft at it because maybe he recognizes that it hasn't panned out too well for anyone who went hard at Joe Rogan. And I think that's because, like him or not, Joe Rogan is he's real. I don't think, I mean, there's things that he is an utter professional at that he would probably be considered one of the top authorities, mixed martial arts. The guy digs into it. I would say nutrition for someone who wants to exercise real hard. You could probably argue comedy, but comedy is one of those diverse fields. Comedy is one of those things that doesn't have a universal right or wrong, because something that I may not enjoy, other people might, and things like that. But anyway, so he's kind of coming out like that, and he's on Bill Maher, and he kind of shows his bubble on Bill Maher, but as he's going against this, and then he's on other shows. But he is a priest for the orthodoxy coming out of Hollywood. And I'm not trying to bust his chops. That's the waters he swims in. And so that's okay. He can swim away. But it shows when people bring up statistics and facts. Like, one subject that came up on Bill Maher was they were talking about the grooming gang scandals in England. And at first he thought they were talking about the royal family and the stuff that went on with that. And I'm not by any means a well versed in that. I do know something happened. I do know that it seems like they were close to people who was doing stuff like that, but I'm not well versed enough to speak about it. But it's the Rotherham is the name that's kind of been given to us. It's been going on for a long time, a lifetime now. That these Pakistani immigrants have have taken advantage of the poorest, the most vulnerable white, Sikh, and other non-Muslim girls, and probably Muslim girls as well. And it was covered up by the police over there because the police did not want to, maybe initially did not want to did not want accusations of racism. And then it seems like it got ingrained in their culture. And then their immigration has run away to a point where it's offended their populace, to where their populace is out in the streets marching and everything else. And their police even threatened to arrest U.S. citizens for us talking. And that's an interesting thought. Like, what if you went to England and you had said something bad on the internet about their practices and they arrested you for it? That'd be wild. How would that look on the stage? But anyways, that's just to go back, that come full circle. I got wandered out in the weeds. I apologize. The progressive orthodoxy of the U.S. is failing, which is why they are flailing, which is why we're seeing violence pop up. Obviously, the Charlie Kirk, the 3 attempts on then candidate, but now President Trump. And believe me, anyone who's got heartburn with the current government, I'm with you. But I think political violence lends us down a path that would not be beneficial to anyone. It's just my thoughts on it. But I don't know. What is, I don't know. We don't have many people in here right now, and no one's bringing up subjects, so I guess I'll just keep rolling. So, the things that have been on my mind this week is I feel like we live under a predatory government. And this isn't just a call out on the Democrats, but it'll be a call out on Republicans. It'll be a call out on the institution. It'll be, maybe we'll wrap this up in a thought process about how New York might head down its path that Mom Donnie wants to take it down, and what that could look like in the holes. And but when I say predatory government, I talk about, so our government and institutions, particularly the HHS of our government, took our tax money. It's looking like this is clear that this is what happened. And if I'm wrong, then when they finally come clean, then I guess I can come clean. But under Anthony Fauci, took our money, took our tax dollars, sent it overseas to have viruses tested and modified and made more viral. And then those viruses got released on the world. And then that same government, under those same people, hid it from us and turned around and locked us down under the guise of protecting us, unless, and this is where the progressive orthodoxy steps in, unless it was to riot over George Floyd, a guy that I don't even need to disparage his name. He is a guy that was busted with counterfeit money, regardless of how he had it, that died while in the initial custody of police. Regardless of how he died, the fact is he was in the custody of police for a reason, and he died in the police's custody. My personal belief is he died primarily because of an overdose, and then everyone gathering around the police officer probably put that police officer in a state of confusion where the police officer made a lot of mistakes. 100%. I'm not going to deny that. That's just my thoughts. And so the orthodoxy came out and said, we've got to lock ourselves in our home and quadruple mask, and we've got to pull our mask down to take a bite and then pull our mask up while we chew. And you have to wear a mask in a restaurant until you get to your seating arrangement, and then you sit down and then you can unmask. And only certain multi-million dollar corporations are allowed to remain open, and others, generally small mom and pops and things like that, have to close, and hairdressers and everything else. I remember Texas. It's the one that really sticks in my head, and I can't remember the names, and I apologize for this, but a hairdresser in Texas got arrested. I want to say outside of Houston. She got arrested, and it was the lieutenant governor. I should remember his name. He's kind of a hero in the way he operated this. Kind of went to bat for her, and I think bailed her out. And he was on Fox News when Fox News was completely on board with locking everything down and let's destroy the economy for this, which turns out to be a flaw, and shutting schools down and all that. And he said, look, I'm old. He said, I don't want to destroy my grandkids' life for my well-being. And I thought, man, that's how an old man should think. An old man should be willing to fall on the sword for his grandkids. 100%. But it's neither here nor there. Republicans obviously recovered better of their faulty logic than the Democrats. And the Democrats kept it locked down. And I 100% believe the Democrats did that as their gut reaction against the administration at the time, against Donald Trump. And then they kept it going a little bit under Biden because they had already struck the iron. Also, there's other reasons. The Democrats are currently the party that supports the government because the government falls into that progressive orthodoxy. They are a part of that religion. So that's kind of a predatory government. And then there's no accountability from Fauci for what he did. He's still getting a retirement. He gets health insurance that we pay for, when really he should be put on trial. The trial should be criminal. The trial should expose everything. We need to start exposing when government does wrong. I don't know how we can expect to remain a functional country, let alone a unipower on the world stage, with a government as predatory as this one is. And everyone argues, well, in the 50s, they had 90% tax on the top earners. Well, yeah, but that's because there was one industrial place left on the planet. World War II had destroyed Europe. Africa was not and is not an industrial place at the time. Mexico has been coming out of a civil war now for a couple hundred years. You had some South America, but South America, I'm not going to say the U.S. does not carry any blame for that, but it keeps playing with very erratic government, such as the governments we're playing with now, but it's been doing that for a long time. Erratic, where they swing from socialist to more of an imperialistic nationalist government, and these heavy swings lends it to where businesses don't want to go down there and start up because they don't know what the next administration or the next control will look like. Will their businesses be safe? So we could afford to have huge taxes because we were it. And with that, we were reaping huge benefits. But now there's competition in the world, including competition on places that businesses can go and set up, such as we found out in China over the last, 40 years, slowly building up, but really kind of the last 20 years. China builds everything. They have become that grind area for industrialization. They have liberalized, in the classical tense, their regulatory practices to where it looks attractive to people who want to start up a business. India, I think, would be right up there with them, but India still has a heavy regulatory government, such as ours is becoming. It's everyone who's run the numbers. I haven't done this myself, never been to China, but everyone who's done the numbers says it's much easier to start and maintain a business in China. All you have to do is be willing to allow the government to monitor you, either by putting a government official there in your business if you're big enough, or if you're not big enough, to allow the government to go through your books at their whim. So yeah, I don't know what the future holds for the US, but we keep heading down this predatory government track, and it seems like we just keep stacking on more regulation and more and new crazy taxes, and people who argue for more taxes don't recognize that businesses now can leave and be more competitive. I mean, you've got Ford and Chevy have vehicles made in Mexico, and that's not to say that it's bad that Mexico gets industry, but it's bad that we lose it. It's bad that Detroit dried up and went from the most modern, beautiful city on earth in the 50s to what it is today. And that brings me to Mom Donnie. So his dream of New York is this democratic socialist New York where rent controls reign supreme, where socialized food markets reign supreme. And I'm not arguing that he's doing it with negative intentions. I'm sure he has positive intentions. And socialists always, to be a socialist, you have to thirst for more power. You have to, because you have to have more power to achieve your goals of helping other people. And so he's going to advance rent control, which means that let's say you rent an apartment, and the prices all around the city, including upkeep of said apartment, go up, and things deteriorate in that apartment. So you rent an apartment to a family for 4 years, and it's rent controlled, and they have you charging what would be, 1/3 the going rate. And just the taxes on the apartment and the mortgage, because, most apartments are bought on a mortgage, even if you're going to rent them. Same with houses by an individual. It's different if you're talking Vanguard and that stuff, but BlackRock, I guess. But how do they justify renting an apartment at a loss? So those apartments are going to start to dry up. And Mom Donnie has dreams of the government building, I think it was like 220,000 apartments. My numbers might be wrong, but he talked about that. And so then the government will be on the hook for apartments that will be rent controlled. And that means the liability for those apartments, including the maintenance of them, will be put on you. But also the government will probably fall into the trap that California has with its initiatives for building homeless apartments, where they build the most expensive ones because it'll be argued by them they have to have the latest and greatest. Has to be above nominal levels of eco-friendliness. It has to be, smart and all this stuff, which it's more cost to the taxpayers. And then those apartments still deteriorate. And every time they're supposed to refit them, they're going to be going back to the coffers. So how is New York going to maintain its populace? Its wealthy will leave. Then its upper middle class will leave. And it will further deteriorate. And then with that, the violence levels will start reaching percentages that are uncomfortable. And then it's just securely middle class will have taken a step down. For a minute there, it'll probably feel great to them because they're the wealthiest people in the situation. But eventually that world will implode on them as well. And then they will leave. And then the violence and uncomfortable percentages will continue to go up. And then that city will be digging for more money, and it will find itself at a mine that has run dry. And in that same point, you'll see whenever you regulate something, we've learned this historically. I mean, let's remember when they made alcohol illegal, bootleggers appear. Drugs are made illegal. Next thing you know, drug dealers. That becomes a means for people in tough situations, maybe people with a different level of survival instinct, or, for whatever reason, or people who are just unable to find quote unquote legitimate work, find themselves doing. So will we see bootlegging, apartment renting? I mean, remember that guy was killed in New York over selling what they call loosies, because New York had such a high tax on cigarettes that people would go to New Jersey, buy cartons of cigarettes, and sell them one cigarette at a time because it was cheaper for the end line consumer to do it that way. And then when the police came up, the police put him in an illegal headlock and killed him. I forget the guy's name. And that one should have got way more attention because that was an over-regulation and over-taxation issue that drove a black market. But black markets arise, That's what they do. So I'm wondering, I'm excited. Not excited, that's incorrect word. I am anticipating. I'm interested. That's a better word. I'm interested to see what power Mom Donnie grabs to his administration and how he has to keep grabbing more said power because more people will find ways to subvert it, and then to see what abuses become of that, because that's what you have to watch out for. All right. So, but I don't know. That's my 2 cents. But our government's predatory. Where does it end? Where does it go? Everyone who's listened to this before knows my answer is we probably need to lean into the 10th Amendment. We need to separate the federal government as much as we can from the individual life and let people find their level of buoyancy state. Let them find a state that fits in with their idea of how they want to live. If they want to live in a state that offers a lot of amenities and has high taxes for that, then they can find that. If they want to live in a laissez-faire state, they can find that. If they want to live, imagine the different states and maybe even counties and cities. You might see states start loosening their levers of power and letting counties and cities decide their fates as such. And it'll be interesting to see. You'll see, I imagine you'd see wild levels of migration through the country all the time. And maybe that's why they don't want to do it, because then the census would always be trying to catch up with what happened new. There'd be Congress people thrown out, new Congress people elected to be thrown out 6 years later. But just a lot of thoughts on my mind about that. So Jordan hops on and says, hey, brother Jared. Guess what, bro? I had a job interview at Burlington store. I hope I can get the job. Dude, I hope you do too. I wish you the best with that. I'm a firm believer that there are 2 ultimate freedoms in a young man's life. 3, I should say 3. The first one is your driver's license. Getting your driver's license, that ability to move about at your own will, that is a huge freedom. My girlfriend's oldest son, he was kind of against it. And I told him those very words. That is the most freedom you'll feel in your life. It will be a monumental situation, like it's a feeling that you will yearn to feel again for the rest of your life. And then he got his driver's license. He was 18 at the time when he got it. He was kind of arguing against it, and I kind of forced him to go do it. But he told me, you were right. And he's happy. He bought his own car. He's got his own thing, and he loves that freedom. Now, our younger boy, he's recognized that that's a thing because he's kind of a young carhead, The next freedom will be when you get that job and you get your own money. You will make mistakes with that. You will. Hopefully you're in a situation right now, those mistakes don't be too ultimately costly for you, but you will make mistakes with that. That is pretty impressive. And then the next one is when you make that adult money and spend that adult money and segregate yourself from your parents to where you are completely on your own, where you make all the decisions for yourself. And you will make mistakes with that as well. You will. Now, that's not to say everyone can experience these freedoms. There are situations where some people cannot. And and there are other freedoms they find, but I think in the average young man's life, those are the freedoms that are those freedoms always come as always change into kind of a burden later on. When you have a car, next thing you know, everyone is, well, when you're a young man in the house, you have a car, you become the shopper. They hand you money and they say, you go to the store and you get us this, this, and this. Well, mom, I was doing this, or dad, I was doing that. Yeah, go get your little brother, go get your little sister, things like that. When you get a job and you say to your parents, hey, I want to eat this for dinner. Like, you got money, go do it. Still another part of freedom in the end of that. But then you start recognizing what it's like when you run low on money. And when you have your own place and you jump in over your head, that is another freedom that gets costly, especially if you buy a house and things start breaking on it and you start learning those little traits. Learn how to fix stuff yourself, guys. You're a man. You need to. All right. So he says, Jordan says, yo, party with Jared and Holly. Woohoo, party time. Where is Holly? Holly should get herself on here. So Holly, I sent her the link, but she probably won't be able to get on. She had her husband's work Christmas party tonight. So her and her husband and maybe even the kids are at his work's Christmas party, and I hope it's a banger for them. I hope they have a lot of fun. I hope the food is good. All those things. So, I don't know. What else you guys want to talk about? If we got nothing to talk about, I'll close this out at 7. I'm just the thing that's on my mind is predatory government. Like, you got the stuff that happened around COVID. You've got, and if you're on the left, you're going to dislike this, but the stuff that happened around January 6th, the more stuff comes out on that, it sounds like the government used that more as a political ploy than it was real judicial measures. That's concerning. The ICE stuff right now, I believe we do need to get a hold of our immigration system. It's run rampant. I mean, Biden just kind of cut people loose into the country. I shouldn't say Biden did. Biden was out. I don't think he really did a lot as president himself. I think it was his young administration that kind of ran roughshod then. It's not the first time it's happened in our country. I mean, Woodrow Wilson had a stroke and his wife kind of ran the administration for the last 2 years of his administration. But they kind of went roughshod and they went ultra left. So he had brought a cabinet around him that was ultra left. And I'm not talking as vice president. I'm talking the people behind the scenes, the chief of staff and what have you. And I almost think they responded. They did a knee-jerk reaction to Donald Trump's messaging during his first administration about we need to get a grip on our immigration. And they totally pushed away from that just because it was his message. I don't think all immigration is bad, but I do think that levels like that are very concerning, especially to the most vulnerable of the populace. If you bring in who was it? Doug Stanhope, the comedian, had a joke that if you're getting replaced by a guy who can't speak English, then, you're whatever, a loser or whatever. And whatever you think about that. But what that says is that you don't care about the most vulnerable of your populace. I should have brought this up before the show, and I'm not going to dig for it, but I remember reading a study in the Labor Department. I want to say it was through the Labor Department that all job growth from the end of COVID through 2003, which is when they done it, or they did it in 2004, but through the beginning of 2003, all job growth went towards immigrants. So we come out of a time of historic job loss, right? To a time when the recovery went away from our most vulnerable, to where if you're in those markets where you compete with where you're competing with in a market where they would hire an illegal immigrant that they could hold hostage, maybe that's the incorrect way to put it, but if you're competing in that market, you lost. And to do that to our citizens, I mean, and then that reinforces the desire for further people to immigrate here. And they immigrate here as an economic immigrant. They want to come here temporarily, get their nut, and get back home. So they are transient minded. And when someone's transient minded, they don't care as much about the well-being of where they're going to. Maybe they litter a little more. Might show up like that. Maybe they move into a neighborhood and move in too many people into a home and too many cars, and they become a little bit of a nuisance in the neighborhood. Maybe they, on the extreme end, seek to fulfill their desires in a manner that harms young nurses going for a walk or a jog. Maybe they get a car, and because they've got that kind of parachute handed to them by this foreign state, maybe they don't get insurance, or maybe they don't tend to have as much care when they drive. So things like that show up where your citizens start being abused because you want to have your political desires fulfilled. And that's what Joe Biden and the Democrat Party brought to us. That's what they did. Now, will there be holes in any economy that we would like to have filled, or that it would be more appropriate to be filled with immigration? Sure. I'm not saying that's not true. And I have had incorrect takes on it. Not too long ago, I said, well, the H-1B visas are probably good because I was under the illusion that the H-1B visas would be a competitive force on the middle class, on the white collar, and cause more churn up there, which on itself, bad call on my part. Second, after I talked right out of my ass, I went and looked it up, and it seems to be kind of a ploy where they bring over family members and certain cast members and stuff like that. And they fill, then again, jobs that outcompete our most vulnerable citizens. So I was wrong on that. I fully eat that. And I think Donald Trump is wrong on that, or was at a time. He tends to have a little floating on the whims. And imagine, imagine if you're one of these guys competing in the modern AI forum, because that's the new competitive ground, is building AI. And you can hire a US coder or whatever, or you can hire one from India that will cost you less, but that's stealing a job from a citizen. And I think we should look at hire a citizen until there is no citizen available to hire, and then look outside. I remember hearing about the Wobblies around the turn of the century between 1800 and 1900, and there were mining union strikes that was called the Wobblies. And the Wobblies, right or wrong, they were a socialist union movement. And the state, abused them in a lot of circumstances, but they just went over and brought in a whole bunch of the big ones they brought in was Greek and Italians, who their countries were going through a big economic downturn. So they brought them over here, and a lot of young men were willing to come over, and they've became a part of our society, and descendants of them still live here, and they're 100% American. But that was just to break a particular union. This just seemed like it was wholesale. Just everything wholesale. It was, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like. But back to the ICE. I don't know if ICE, the concern I have with ICE is the left is already ramping up to violence at every turn. All their spokespeople are speaking violent. Their politicians are speaking violence. And so I don't know. I don't know if, and ICE isn't probably the only thing they're using. And I don't know what the answer is, but maybe it's just that that's what we see because that's what the media brings us, because that's a progressive orthodoxy preaching moment where they can talk about the evil of the non-orthodox, non-progressive down the street who's committing sins. Because I haven't seen any ICE myself. Of course, I'm out here in, rural Utah, which maybe there wouldn't be a chance for that. But I don't know. Jordan says, fun. I love Christmas parties. Yo, Jared, you should sing Jingle Bells. Nobody, and I mean nobody, especially me, wants to hear me sing. I would do it, but nobody wants it. Trust me that. Yeah, I don't know. Feels like, and then to the left right now, they see the Trump administration as an abusive government that is abusing them by kind of pointing out their nutty ideals, like, letting a failed boy athlete go compete in the girls department. I can't believe the left ran that far, but it's just like when the at the time the religious conservatives, because there were also Democrats in the late 90s and early 2000s, wanted creationism taught in your science class alongside the theory of evolution. Is there a chance the theory of evolution could be wrong? There is. I believe in evolution, but there is a chance. And I'm not going to fault anyone for telling me that they don't believe in it, because lots of people believe lots of things that are crazy. And I'm not going to. One, I've learned, I'm an old man now, I've learned you can't talk people out of a belief that they have talked themselves into. You cannot. They have to talk themselves out of it. You cannot. All you can do is, show them what little you can. And if it takes, it takes. And if it doesn't, you've got to hope that their belief is something that you can still hold a community or a situation down with. But I remember back then, the conservative religion, the religious conservatives wanted that forced by the government. And I believe that is when we got this, that birthed this orthodoxy. And you've had some that's broken out of it and some that are in the state of breaking out of it when the left went crazy, but some are still completely in it. So a couple people, nominal mentions that I will bring up surrounding this orthodoxy. And in the process of that, towards the end of the 2010s, but around 2010, the Republicans got all of the religion, all of them completely rolled in. The religious conservatives all rolled into Republicans, and the Democrats lost all religious conservatives, and they gained at the time all of the science and kind of logic based. Now, there are still other groups. These are those two groups that split. So in those groups that I would kind of measure on that would be like Sam Harris. Sam Harris has come out and he's become a total zealot where if it involves the religious right, they will be wrong under any circumstance. And if it involves Donald Trump, he will be wrong under any circumstance. And he was on that trigonometry 2 times ago and made a fool of himself, where he said he doesn't care if Joe Biden had children locked up in the basement, he still would vote for him over Donald Trump. And that was shocking to me that someone would say something like that out loud, but he said that. And then you've got some that are breaking out of, or some that have broken out of it. So that before mentioned, Brett Weinstein, he broke out of it. Now, the sad news is he broke out of it, and it seems like there's something in humans where we have to have a political party And I'm not saying he's that way, but the left, the Democrats have only left one avenue because there's not a logical Democrat Party right now. They've only left, well, two avenues. You can become a political agnostic, such as myself, or you can go to the conservatives, which is where Tulsi Gabbard has ended up, and RFK Jr. Brett Weinstein is, and I keep saying it a different way because I don't know exactly how you're supposed to say it. There's probably a rule. I don't know the rule. Can't follow a rule I don't know about. So I hope I'm not offending anyone. And if anyone knows a proper way, please let me know. I will gladly use that here and forever because I have the utmost respect for that man. James Lindsay's another one. He broke out of it. Peter Boghossian. Those are guys that broke out of it. And James Lindsay went to where now, I wouldn't call him a conservative, but he shows up speaking to conservatives and speaking for conservatives, and also like even speaking for Donald Trump. He even voted for Donald Trump this last go round. And it was an interesting talk where he's talking to his wife, and his wife said a positive thing in a way that he felt gave him permission to vote outside of where he's voted his whole life. Peter Boghossian, still, I mean, he rides that line. But at the same time, as you start seeing the ridiculousness of the left rise, you're going to start seeing them acting more and more erratic, such as more violent situations pop up. Like when they said that Trump rallies are Nazi rallies and the Republican National Convention was akin to a Nazi rally. And then they said, well, the Nazis had a convention there at where was it? In New York. And but also so did Bill Clinton. They didn't mention that. So it's just, you start seeing them act more radical, and you see it coming out of the news and the media a lot too. Like the BBC just had a big kerfuffle where they got caught clipping Donald Trump's January 6th rally and clipping it together so it looked like he called for violence. But when you play the whole thing, it's like they clipped 2 30-minute or whatever apart sentences, clipped them together so it looked like he said something more violent. And they're like two of their heads of whatever, the head of news and the head of the whole BBC or something like that, had to step down over that. That's disgraceful. And then you start looking into other stories they've had, and you start wondering if because of this orthodoxy, you can know, is that the reason the media has given up all of its integrity just for this orthodoxy? They've picked a side. They're going to say whatever they have to keep this side in power. I was in the 2010, in the early 2000s up till whenever, I was a big fan of listening to Christopher Hitchens talk. He was very articulate. He was a very interesting guy to listen to. And his big claim to fame is he would mostly speak out on 3 things: on pro-atheism, anti-Islam, and anti-Bill and Hillary Clinton. Real interesting kind of circle there. Now the atheism and Islam thing, that you can understand, but the Clinton thing, you really didn't understand. But he did not like the Clintons. And I've often wondered, up the 2016 run, would he, if he was still alive, he died of throat cancer before any of this happened, but would he have came out because he was on the left, but the left, since those times when he gave those talks, had changed and became pro-atheist, bingo for him, pro-Islam, that he would have been like, what are you doing? And of course, pro-Clinton. And so I wonder because Sam Harris was a part of his cadre of atheists that go around and talk. They called themselves the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. But would he have followed the same path as Sam Harris and gone down and given up all kind of logical integrity to go against Donald Trump? And not saying you're illogical if you go against him, but I am saying that Sam Harris gave up his logical, just that conversation on trigonometry, gave up all his logical integrity to go against him. What would Christopher Hitchens have done? That's an interesting thought to me. If only he would have survived. I would have liked to have seen because Christopher Hitchens had two of those. Now, Christopher Hitchens was never anti-Bill and Hillary Clinton. He was anti-Republican. But I don't know if he was pro-Bill and Hillary Clinton. But he's also anti-Islam. He wrote a paper on pro-torture at the time. That was really interesting. But he gave up the anti-Islam thing to go against Trump. Now, Trump is bombastic, and I'm sure he's done criminal things in his life. Who on those levels haven't? I mean, but I wonder what Christopher Hitchens would have done. That's a quarry I really wish we could have seen. Would have been interesting to see how his life morphed and changed through the years, especially as he got older. Of course, he's got a brother, Peter Hitchens, who's a huge conservative in England, who is pro-religion. These are two brothers. They used to debate each other a few times. Wild debates. Really good stuff. But I don't know. I'm just chatting off in the weeds. No one's bringing me back in. Danny Phantom says, greetings from Tampa, Florida. I just discovered your channel and I like your libertarian content. Also, I'm still celebrating the U.S. men's soccer team 5-1 victory over Uruguay here in Tampa last night. Outstanding, good sir. Yeah. I don't know much about soccer, I'll be honest with you. I didn't know the U.S. men's played Uruguay last night, but congratulations to them. I know soccer is a worldwide competitive sport. That's fantastic. It's fantastic to see the U.S. win. I remember, the females used it as a bludgeon that they were top and they didn't make as much as the men's when the men wasn't on top. But of course they didn't understand, or maybe they did understand, but it was selfish of them to pretend they didn't. Economics of, viewership. And so it's good to see the U.S. men's team climb on top. Always root for the U.S. in everything they do. And then libertarian. Thank you, sir. Yes, I myself am a registered independent, but at heart, I'm a libertarian. I'm just hoping that the libertarians show up to the party sometime. I do. I would definitely vote for one if we had one show up. yeah, that's it. I'm a free market guy. I'm a try to stay out of the way of your populist guy. Um, yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else anyone wants to chat about? We could, you know, let me go look at Facebook. Facebook's quiet. No one over there wants to talk. Maybe it's a boring subject everyone just watches and wants to talk to Holly. That's fine. She's the more attractive of the two. But I think we'll probably get ready to close this out. I just want to leave you with this. I don't know what the future holds. I do know that we just saw a rally for the Democrats during this last batch of elections. Uh, New York, New Jersey, Virginia. Trump is that polarizing figure that can cause that. I don't think he has to be, though. I think it's the media that brings that on. I mean, let's face it, Trump is what only made president in 2016 because of the media's collusion with Hillary Clinton. I think it was called Operation Pied Piper or something. And that is pretty that's gotta get in their cod and just kind of gotta burn their ass a little bit that they pushed him to the front thinking that Hillary would beat him soundly. So they pushed him to the front in the Republican primaries. You know, had him on The View and every talk show had him on, every news station. They didn't go an hour without mentioning him in during the Republican primaries. And then after he secured the nomination, then they did it again. Except then they started going negative, right? The old October surprise time starts happening. And so they start going negative and start rolling negative out all the time without recognizing that not a lot of people watch them. They're a dying thing. And yeah, I mean, that Gutenberg press moment had happened and it had split the Catholic Church in a historical term, I guess. You know, it don't take that directly as being, but it split. The internet has made it so that people can pursue the entertainment and knowledge they want. They're not pinned to what is brought to you by the boob tube. It's whatever you want. If you want to go and watch people play video games all night, you can do that. If you want to go and watch car videos, you can do that. If you want to go and do whatever, you can watch whatever you want. I like to watch hunting and I watch lots of political stuff. I like science stuff, you know? Yeah. William, hello, Jared. I'm glad to hear your interesting point of view again. I hope Holly is okay. Greetings for both. William, it's good to see you again, man. Hopefully everything is good for you. Down. William, you're in Central America, correct? And I hope everything is good for you there. I don't know. We're in a churning of civilizations right now. The West is through the progressive side of the West, it is attempting suicide. And what I fear is that the conservative side of the West will overreact. Maybe that's ultimately my message. I wish the progressive side would quit trying to commit civilizational suicide and start taking stock in what is good and holding on to it. Yeah, Ecuador's right at the top of South America, if I remember. I better pull up a map. That's where William's from. If I remember. I'll just go to My geography has failed me right now. But I don't know. I hope that we can. Yeah, Ecuador's in South America, right above Peru. I don't know. I hope the progressives quit trying to commit suicide, because if they do that, if they keep trying, oh, okay. Jeff has a question. How much constitutionalist is mixed in with the libertarian? I very much love the Constitution. I'm a huge Bill of Rights guy, and I think the Constitution is intelligently wrote. I think that the big savior for the United States right now would be to lean on the 10th Amendment, and that would be for the federal government to step back at any circumstance that is not serving the general populace right now and let the state step in and take that over. I think the general government is failing at holding up to those standards. And I really would like to see a petri dish test. And it might fail. I might be totally wrong. I am not a very intelligent guy. I'm just old. Yes. Yeah, William. How are things in Ecuador right now? Are they going good, or is it it's the government? I haven't heard much about Ecuador lately. Of course, Brazil's hot on mind. Never forget about Venezuela. Argentina seems to be doing some pretty wild things. El Salvador is doing awesome things. Argentina and El Salvador is kind of showing a roadmap on which is more effective, the libertarian in Argentina design, or the kind of is ultra conservative the way to put it, but a heavy conservative in El Salvador design. El Salvador's not putting up with violent crimes abusing its populace anymore. It's just not. And so we'll have to see how that turns out. But it's turned El Salvador, which was one of the scariest places on earth, into one of the safest just by dealing with its crime problem. So that's wild. Argentina took a schizophrenic, collapsing economy, which was driven by inflation by their national government, and has kind of made it to where it looks like it's on the road to thriving. So interesting to watch. I don't know, look forward to seeing new stuff come out about that. I don't know, but been on here a little over an hour. Holly, it doesn't look like she'll be able to jump on. She was, at the Christmas party, and that would be a lot to expect to have her pull away. Next week is Thanksgiving here in the US. I know if you're up in Canada, you did Thanksgiving last month. I don't know if and when they celebrate that in other countries. It's a kind of a harvest festival, I suppose, when you look at it, or a family celebration of the harvest. Jeff Adamson says federal government began failing when it expanded beyond providing for a common defense. Yeah, 100%. But you could also argue it began failing. Like if you want to look at it just kind of weird, nerdy, really kind of the initial failure is when the whiskey tax. I mean, that was an abuse. When the what was it called? It was called the Congressional Notes, when they paid the Revolutionary soldiers in, gosh, what were they called? Colonial notes or something. They paid them in, money that was printed over here, and then wouldn't redeem that money for a lot of the soldiers who lost everything in the war. They weren't home to pay for their land and pay their dues or do their crops or anything else. And some of them lost everything, and then they were hard up. And then a lot of them got bought out in the weeks before Congress voted to honor those. And so there's always been predators who get into power. It's just those didn't have the ability to reach out and touch everyone like they can now. I remember someone saying in the late 1800s, it was only like 13% of the population would ever meet someone who worked for the federal government. The federal government was that small and that far away from you. And now everybody, every man, woman, and child who reaches adulthood, who reaches, let's say, 35, will meet someone who works for the federal government. They will, I would argue, not just, they will meet someone who works for the federal government in a bureaucratic status. And that is wild to think about. So William says, well, things here are difficult here when it comes to security because we are dealing with drug traffic thanks to our previous socialist government that allowed everybody to enter the country without country. Now, granted, he's writing from Ecuador, so I thank him for writing in English and putting this down because I wish, but I cannot. I don't know Spanish. I spent 6 months in Cuba and learned uno cerveza, por favor. So, William, thank you for writing in English. I would have to really dig hard into Google Translate to get through anything written in Spanish, and I would mess it up. But yeah, you've got to, I think, like I said, if people are coming to your country as kind of migratory status, they don't tend to take care of it because they're not vested in it. You want the people to be vested in where they go. So if you get, he said he meant control, not country. Entered the country without control. President Noboa is trying to fix that problem and many others, but he just has 2 years as president, so he has a hard task. And that is tough. Yeah, 2 years as president. Oh, that's a quick term. And that's where you've got to strive to make it a part of the culture. And I don't want, and I'm not saying I would like to see a culture of people who are mean to immigrants and things like that. But you got to make it a part of a culture to where businesses will have the morality that they will take care of the populace there, that the most vulnerable of your populace will not be swept under the rug for some globalist ideal, not to sound like Alex Jones, but that's really kind of what it is. And at the same time, let's say you're a progressive with a grudge against the US, especially say you're a progressive from maybe Eastern Europe who's mad about the Soviet bloc falling and you want to get revenge, and you're wealthy, and you start supporting aid groups that help people come over here. You cause a low trust society, which makes people, it causes a feedback loop where you cause this low trust society that makes people run for stronger government, where the government is weighed heavy on the actions that you commit, which causes further low trust societies, which makes people run harder on the government. The government starts having more, USAID and things like that, which in the feedback loop, you get the money back that you spent to destroy America because USAID supports your nonprofit, non-government organizations. And it becomes a feedback loop where ultimately you may be getting rich off of destroying a country, and that country is paying you, making you rich to continue to destroy that country, which is what I believe has been going on with George Soros for the last 20 years. Okay. Fruiel. I probably mangled that. But hey, here, I'll throw it up on screen if you guys can read it. Fruiel. Anyways, and then William says that Danny Phantom, congratulations to USMNT. You played very well. I love that game. Yes. And that's Danny Phantom from Tampa, where the U.S. men's did a 5-1 victory over Uruguay. 5-1. A five scores in soccer that's an excellent run. I mean, soccer usually if you get 3 scores in a game, that's a good game. 5, that's impressive. That is very impressive. Yeah, I don't know if there's much else to talk about. I could just keep rambling on. Yeah, U.S. government. I think it'd be better for state government to deal with the welfare of its populace, not the common defense, but the common welfare. But if you're going to have welfare, like such as in SNAP and all that, I think it should be done honestly on the city level, but at the most a state level. I don't think that should be for a general government. The U.S. is a big place. It's way diverse. The diverse in geography, diverse in industry, diverse in ability. Here in Utah, we are growing fast. A lot of people are moving here, but Utah has a couple problems. We don't have a huge surplus of water. So it's hard for us to keep up with that growth when we don't have a lot of water to keep up with that growth with. You get towards the Midwest where you've got the Mississippi and Ohio and all that right there. I mean, those are major trade routes that you can take advantage of and build industry around. You've got the Great Lakes. Of course, on both coasts, industry just happens to be a logical idea to build by the coast, because that way you can get stuff on a ship and move your stuff globally cheaper and easier than having to put it on a train, then a ship, or a truck, then a train, then a ship, or a truck, then a ship, or a train, then a truck, then a ship. You see what I'm saying? That sounded like a Dr. Seuss ditty right there I just pulled out. So, it's a diverse country. And with that diverse country and diverse in its populace, a lot of Mormons here, but you head up in the Northwest, you kind of got that old school, they've fallen away from it, but kind of still a Protestant bent to them. You You got the Bible Belt where you got a lot of evangelists, um, Catholics dispersed kind of in the in between areas. You go to the West Coast, and from what I understand, when I've looked this up, you've got a split between those depending on what time and what drew them out there, whether it was gold rush or it was hunting for furs. So I think states would be best to handle this better. And we should honestly, we should look at some states even being broken down. California and it should realistically be three states. Texas, for geographical size, should be multiple states. Maybe even Florida, and break them down further, more manageable chunks to chew on, you know. And I don't see that would be a negative thing. And I don't call for that for political reasons. I call for that for just simple economic governance reasons. You got the central area of California is kind of a split between south of it's urban and kind of has to be man maintained to survive. A lot of maintenance goes in that, and that causes a different style of people to be there. And then you got the north, which has a lot of your farms and stuff, and those two situations would benefit from having more localized or more geographically localized government to give them what they need. Let's face it. The North just got shut out by that. What is that, California SB 50, where they kind of gerrymandered by law or wrote gerrymandering into law? They're going to have no representation in rural California for quite a while. They're just not. They're going to pay taxes to a government that doesn't reflect them. William says, Jared, in your opinion, who has been the best president of the U.S. has ever had? Or the one who has come closest to libertarian principles? Reagan? No. William Henry Harrison is my favorite president. If you don't know, look him up. Yes, William Henry Harrison is the best U.S. president we've ever had. He's the one who has done the least damage. And that's not for trying. But a very interesting story. William Henry Harrison, what was he, our 11th president, I want to say? Anyhow, he was at the time the oldest man to have run for president. All the newspapers just talked about how old he was. He was in his 70s in, the early 1800s. And hit him to his car. He got sworn in on I want to say a cold, I think then they did it in April or March. No, it's still February morning, cold February morning. It was raining that day. And to show how vigorous he was a Whig, one of the last Whig presidents as well. He wore no top hat and no overcoat, no greatcoat, or whatever you call it. And he gave the longest speech to that time in history on the steps. And when he was done, he went to the White House, went to bed that night, woke up with pneumonia, slipped into a coma, and died, I want to say 34 days later. He was only president for 34 days. He didn't have a chance to mess it up. So that's why I say he's the best president. But there are presidents I admire. Calvin Coolidge would be my second. Calvin Coolidge he was really the last president who had the true ideals that the government should stay out of the general business of the populace and the economy. You can watch a video of him speaking. He had kind of a higher pitched, squeaky voice. He was kind of a little guy. And they had the crash of 19 while he was president or right before he became president. And they came out and, what are you going to do to fix the crash? And he said something to the count at the gates of the White House. It's not the government's job to fix the economy or whatever, and then closed the gates and went inside. That was like it. He was like, it's not my job. Not going to do that. So he was a good one. And there were presidents who did good things and bad things. Reagan sits as one of those. I mean, remember, Reagan brought us a lot of bad things. He kind of initiated an amnesty for illegal immigrants. And supposedly there was a promise with it from the Democrat Party, but that promise wasn't fulfilled. I think Reagan's actions during the Cold War involving Russia was excellent, but he also brought in no-fault divorce, which has been a disaster for marriages across the country. I may not be a religious man, but I think divorces should be a little more stringent, although I've got one and a half under my belt. But I do think that they shouldn't be whimsical. I think as people, we should honor our commitments we make. That's just my thoughts. But there are great things he did. The stuff that he did during the Cold War, I think were, in my opinion, good stuff. Yeah, Calvin Coolidge was president during the 1920s. Yeah, he was. He followed Harding. He followed Harding, and he was the last president to be hands off, Republican or Democrat. And then of course, trying to remember who was direct after him, but then we had Hoover, and Hoover was there for the crash of 29, the lead off to the Great Depression. And Hoover was a big government guy. And then FDR ran against big government involvement in the economy and then tripled down on everything Hoover did. It's just like how George W. said, when he was running, he said, we don't want a government that's involved in foreign entanglements. We don't want to use our military as a democracy-making machine. And we saw how that panned out. And, and Bush laid the tracks for Obama to expand. And then we were involved everywhere after that. So it's kind of where it went. It's just interesting. And we've got to remember, presidents are just men. They really are. I mean, George Washington, undoubtedly a great man, very intelligent, very intrinsic in the French Indian Wars, what brought the colonies in kicked off, I believe, the 7 Years' War, and made England broke. It destroyed France, but it made England broke. And which led off to the colonies rebelling, and then gave this great experiment a chance. And maybe this experiment had a lifespan of 200 years, 250 years. Maybe that's all you can hope for. And then something else has to be reborn. And maybe it'll, I'm not going to be one who's going to say socialism could never work, because I am old enough to know that I am wrong way more than I'm right. We just haven't seen it work, and I don't see how it could. Granted, I'm not the smartest person on earth. Maybe Mamdani is an utter genius, and he's thought of everything, and he's figured out how to lay in controls so that his government doesn't become abusive to the populace. His rhetoric doesn't lean that, where he's talking about going in and his words were taxing the white neighborhoods more. But that sounds like an abuse. Like, I'm going to abuse you because you've showed self control in life. Because it won't just be, one ethnic group in there. It'll be people who showed self control, who delayed gratification so that they can multiply their gains. I think that's probably the worst part about socialism as we've seen it is there always comes out a strong man who has to make more laws to reinforce the failed law he just made. And then they've got to keep doubling down on that. And then eventually, a wicked person gets a hold of those reins. Now, I'm not saying Lenin wasn't wicked or evil. He did a lot of atrocities himself. But Stalin definitely was. That's what socialism rings in my mind, because that's what's happened every time it's been tried. Either side of socialism, whether you go on the right side of it with the fascist or the left side of it with the communists, it's always ended up being brutalist. Now, you've got free markets with strong social safety nets and high taxes. I wouldn't call those socialists. You have definite property rights. You're just taxed on it. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Maybe it depends on the outcomes. We'll have to see. I mean, Northern Europe's survived this long because they're essentially one people for the most part. They're homogenic. They have an abundance of natural resources to tap into. They have a middle-sized population on a larger size of land, which lets them spread out. So they have all those things that leans toward a high trust society. That's the homogeneity is so important in situations like that, where almost everyone's of, and this is not getting racial, but it naturally kind of has to be. Everyone's kind of the same race. They don't look at each other and have to segregate. They're getting that way because they threw their doors open pretty hard. Utah was easily the happiest and cleanest state in the U.S. because of homogeneity. Everyone had the same religion, which means everyone had common values. Everyone was culturally held to account because you would see everyone every week in church. And then once a month, those churches would gather for a bigger church session. You see what I'm saying? Can that be built with multiple races? Of course it can. Of course. You've got to get a common value, which is why I say if governments dealt with welfare state by state, it's easier to build a common value. If they dealt with it county by county, it's much easier to build a common value. And if they dealt with it city by city, it's so much easier. But if If you're asking me how I feel about the federal government sending 80 million to New York to aid in housing immigrants from another country who came here under whatever pretense when we're 30 whatever trillion in debt, I don't feel good about that. I I don't know how that can go on. I don't. I I don't know. I don't know. Is the US, is it just gonna end up that we have to default on our debt, or do we invent a new currency to absorb the debt? Or does the rest of the world continue to pull away from using the dollar as the base for all international trades between different currencies until, will it just kind of go away slowly where the dollar doesn't matter and then it won't matter if we default? Or, God forbid, are we going to send our young men abroad to reinforce using the dollar as the currency of international trade? I don't know. It seems like we've got ourselves into a pickle. How long can we last? Do we just keep devaluing here and then gets to where you have to turn to the government more and more to sustain any kind of retirement or any kind of, when you could no longer work because the currency you saved was devalued. So then Social Security system gets you trapped on that wheel where, you know, you sell your house to get out on the market. I mean, once the boomers are gone, it's going to change the whole. And I'm not saying this to talk bad about boomers, but the boomers, the largest voting bloc in US history, and the voting blocks behind them are so much smaller that the boomers outcompete them in voting. So they get the laws they want, which is why you're seeing different movements pop up now, which were unheard of when the boomers were not retiring. So when the boomers are gone, who knows what will look like? The whole game will change. And us Gen Xers, I mean, we're the smallest generation. We're toast. We're, you know, we're just gonna. You better be ready to. Hopefully, you had kids, because that's where you're gonna end up living with them. You know. Yeah. Jeff says, you're describing the Utah of my youth. Yeah. Yeah. The Utah of my youth, too. Everyone went to church. Everyone knew everyone. Everyone. I mean, I grew up in Grantsville. Um, you, you could have, when I lived there growing up as a kid, there were 5,000, 6,000 people in the whole town. It's getting close to 20 now. The whole school, the whole high school had, I want to say, just over 400 people in it. That's freshman through senior year. It was a small school. It was a small life. All right. William says, our current currency is American dollar here in Ecuador. We adopted it between 1999 and 2000 because we had an economic crisis because of the hyperinflation of our previous currency, called the sucre. Yeah. And that's happening a lot, The The US dollar is, I mean, that's what Argentina's using right now. They went to the US dollar. Um, what were they using before that? Trying to remember the name. It wasn't the Bolivar. I think the Bolivar was Venezuela's currency. But um, they adopted especially then it was we were in debt, but it was a fairly stable currency. In 99 to 2000, that's when Bill Clinton, they used the peso in Argentina. Or Venezuela. Was it Venezuela used the peso? Anyways, Clinton had us at he left us with a fairly financially secure government. Now, I would argue that's not just Clinton. You've got to look at it. You had a Democrat president and a strong adversarial Congress under Newt Gingrich. And so we got a lot of stuff there that were something now that the Democrats would call evil. Our debt was low. We had a new economic model just being born through the internet. We did have the dot-com crash, but the internet was still starting to grow as an economic model. Remember Bill Clinton? Venezuela has bolivars. Okay. Bill Clinton made those welfare changes, where it was something like you could only be on welfare for 3 months or something like that, changed it up to where you had to get work. Just kind of the same thing that Trump's writing in right now, it sounds like, which I think is a good move, You don't want your populace to get stuck on the trap where they become serfs to the government, where, they're taken care of, but they're taken care of in a level where they're trapped. They can never grow out of it. They're trapped. They're given just enough that to get off of it would be unthinkable, but to stay on it is a sentence of despair. You want them. Maybe we should rewrite our welfare so that if someone gets a job, we'll still keep giving them some welfare for some period of time to boost them up. But we can't have it to where when that's taken away, they just quit to go back on welfare. We've got to make people become a productive member of society. We've got to have people fight for that self-respect. William says, Clinton visited Argentina during the 90s. Argentina's been a kind of a psycho mess, but at every turn, it's always gone with a government that ran for inflation. I think the last 40 years, always, even when they leaned into a more right wing, it's never been right wing. They've always kind of leaned into a socialist government, but it just kept heading further and further. And Argentina had devalued its currency so much that it was kind of a laughing stock on the world. And it went from one of the countries that was going to compete to be an economic world power to one that was no one thought of. And maybe they will again. I don't know. We'll see what the libertarian dream runs with down there. It might be it might prove to the world that, hey, this works. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna cut it close here. We went almost 2 hours without Holly. Imagine that. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for coming on. I don't know. We've got the ability through KMMU to open up phone lines, and I think that's something I want to strive to do more. It's just we need to figure out how to do it where someone can man the phones and because it connects through somewhere not here in the house. I don't know. I guess I could just figure out like a Google number and you can call me right on the computer. I just have to learn how to do that. It'd be cool to bring people on and actually hear them. They can actually tell us what they've got going on. Everybody, let's keep Jordan in your thoughts. Hopefully, he gets that job at Burlington. I really hope so. That'd be fantastic for Jordan. William, I hope things are safe for you down there. I hope they straighten out. Yeah, it's the whole world's in kind of a flux. Danny, I want to say good job to the U.S. men's soccer team. Good job. That's outstanding. Very good. And yeah, of course, Jeff, thanks for joining us. And everyone, thanks for your comments. If you guys just had to sit here and listen to me, that'd be an awful show. It's much better when smarter people than I put some input in. Thank you, William. And I will, we won't see you guys next Wednesday leading into Thanksgiving, but we'll be on the Wednesday after. Everyone have a good Thanksgiving. I think I'm going to try to smoke a handful of turkeys and distribute to the family. Got a lot of, I don't know if you guys could send thoughts and prayers to, my family right now, especially my step siblings. We just had a family loss that is going to be felt for a long time. So